Hey there, my name's Rod Yates and you're listening to Humans of Music, a Jaxsta podcast. This is where I talk to music creators and industry professionals about their lives and careers, the ups and downs of their journey and the lessons they've learned along the way. And my guest today is Grammy award-winning producer, songwriter and artist M-Phazes. It may say Mark Landon on his birth certificate, but to the world at large he is M-Phazes, one of Australia's most successful producers and songwriters. He's worked with everyone from Amy Shark to Noah Cyrus to Daniel Johns to Kehlani to Rule to Madonna and Eminem, with whom he won a Grammy in 2015 when the Marshall Mathers LP2 won Best Rap Album. And when you see a list of credits like that, you probably think Phazes has it made, that he's done all the hard yards and his struggles are behind him. But as you'll hear in this conversation, Phazes is really honest about his battles with self-doubt and insecurity, what he's done to overcome them, and how since moving to Los Angeles several years ago, he's pretty much had to start from square one to establish himself. I caught up with Phazes last year and we started by talking about his decision to make that move from Melbourne to LA, armed with a 3-year plan.
What really kind of ignited the fire was a songwriting camp held in Bali every year. So I was invited to this songwriting camp by a guy called Peter. And I'm not sure who I had a chat with, but I had a chat with someone and they kind of like put me in my place at the songwriting camp. They're like, what are you doing in Melbourne? And, you're too comfortable there. And they kind of like gave me a pep talk.
Yeah.
And it really hit me hard. And then that kind of woke me up and says, I am comfortable in Melbourne. And it's getting a little, I guess, it's not challenging anymore, And as much as I love Melbourne and I think there's a great talent there, it's just not. It's not the same as LA, where it's just a hub.
Yeah.
Everyone flies through there. So I decided to make a 3-year plan, and kind of work backwards from that, which really helped me get to to move over there. And so I set this big plan, and then I kind of, I guess, fragmented it into smaller, more manageable pieces, and just started doing it. And
Yeah.
got there in the end. So it actually did take 3 years to make it happen.
And I think I read a quote from you where you actually used the word terrifying.
Oh yeah, it was like I've never lived outside of Australia.
Yeah.
The move from the Gold Coast to Melbourne was pretty scary, but this was a whole nother thing. And especially being older, 35, it's a little more daunting because you're kind of uprooting everything or starting from scratch. When you're like in your 20s, it's a little you're a little more adventurous. Maybe a little less worried about things, and things just tend to work out. But I was a grown adult, so it was scary. I knew it would work out. Like I'm pretty persistent with that sort of stuff, and everything seems to go well eventually. But being kind of plonked in the middle of Los Angeles, sleeping in a friend's guest house. I did have a good network of like friends there already, but
Okay.
it was scary.
Yeah.
It was really scary.
Well, let's talk about, you mentioned that move from Melbourne, from the Gold Coast to Melbourne.
Mm-hmm.
So how long ago was that?
That was in 2007, very start of 2007.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was your plan?
Well, I'd been working on the Gold Coast making music, and somehow my music made its way down to Melbourne into the hands of Nathan Flack, otherwise known as Nate Flagrant, who started reaching out. He was working with a few people. He was working with Daniel Merriweather and an artist called Phrase, who was managing at the time. And they were really interested in working with me. And so I was actually on tour with them on the Bliss and Esso tour. And me and my friends were kind of paying our way on the tour to go on the road with Bliss and Esso. And then Phrase, who was Nate's artist, was the main, opening act. And then Bliss and Esso were the headliners. And so I was hanging out with Nate and Phrase and kicking it with them a lot. And I think it was before a show one night, Nate took me outside. I think we might have been like Townsville or something. Really professional. But he took me outside and we sat on this bench like in the middle of the street basically. And he just said, he's like, I really want to help you and manage you and, look after your career. And he if there's one thing Nate can do really well, he can do many things well, but what he can really do well is sell. Like he sells things. He's just great at that. Artists. And if he believes in someone, he'll go all out. So, he made a good argument. I was like, that sounds pretty good. And
Yeah.
I had a few people like, lingering around trying to manage me, but Nate was the most straightforward and seemed like he really knew what he was doing.
Okay.
And so first, first thing on the agenda was to get me to Melbourne, because that's where he lived, and it was for what I was doing at the time, which was hip hop music. It was like the mecca for that in Australia.
Yeah,
that's where all the artists were. It was the coolest music that was coming out of Melbourne. Sydney had some artists too, but apparently it hadn't reached the same level as Melbourne at the time.
And did you sleep on his couch for 5 months?
I did sleep on his couch. I slept on his couch, which God knows what has been on that couch. It was one of those cruddy couches that you don't know where it came from. You know, when you're young and you're just like, your furniture just shows up one day and you're like, I don't know where this stuff came from, but I have it and it serves a purpose. I slept on the couch, and then I'm not sure why I didn't just move into his house, because he did have a spare room, but I think the spare room still had a bunch of stuff from the last occupant in it.
Okay.
But anyway, a few months go past, and he's like, "Why don't you just move into take the spare room?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So we set up a little studio in the kitchen. So I was like, across from me was the sink and the stove top.
Yeah.
And on the other side was all my music equipment and some records. And then Nate had his little office in the lounge room area. And it was just like a work hub. And it was the grottiest little apartment you've ever been in. But it was really a good location because it was a penthouse.
Okay.
It was a penthouse in St Kilda on Fitzroy Street. It was funny. We were subletting off a guy who was in the very top penthouse, and his place was really nice. And then under him, he had he ran like a production company called XYZ, and they're doing really well now. They're like killing it. And anyway, so the XYZ office had a little offshoot apartment, and that's where we were.
Okay.
And it felt like it hadn't been cleaned forever, like any time, not once. So it was kind of grimy. My room didn't have an opening window, and it was kind of dusty, but it was fine. It was fun.
Yeah. And are you making a living from it at this point?
I wasn't making a living from it at that point. I was working a day job.
Which was?
Ben Sherman.
Okay.
I was a Ben Sherman worker. I wasn't in the store though. I was in the stock room down below.
Okay.
Like a troll, like Gollum. But no, it was awesome because it was very casual. Like it was like, I think 2 to 3 days a week.
Yep.
I could leave early anytime practically, and I was really good at it. It was quite an easy job. And my boss was awesome. My manager, Lorraine, she was great. She kind of, let me just not do whatever I want, but she was really flexible with it.
Yeah.
So, so I would supplement my income from that with my music money.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until 2010, I signed a publishing deal with Mushroom.
Yep.
And that's what allowed me to step away from the part-time or the casual work.
Yeah, okay.
And do music full-time.
In terms of trying to make it full-time, when do you reckon you actually made the decision that this is what I want to do with my life?
It was early on. It was, I think the decision really solidified back in, I want to say maybe 2005, 2004. Mm-hmm. And it's when I really started to see a little bit of money from music, especially from overseas, because I was on the internet forum sending my music out and gaining feedback. But then I noticed people started like approaching me wanting to buy tracks.
What was that like?
It was amazing. Like I was making $200 to $500 a track. Right. To me, that was like, oh my God, I can make money off this? This is insane. And it just happened organically. Didn't really know what I was doing. Didn't know what publishing was. I was just kind of flying by, selling tracks to artists. And but even before that, I knew it's what I was going to do. I didn't know I could make a profession out of it until then, though.
Yeah, okay.
Until I started seeing checks in the mail.
So you grew up in the Gold Coast.
Yes.
Like how did music come into your life when you were growing up?
I mean, we had the cliche family who were playing music around the house, and my dad owned a Mexican restaurant for a while, and so I'd go in and help him, and he was always playing like music on the system there.
Okay. So that was his profession. He was a restaurateur.
He was a restaurateur for a little while. He was a bartender once, and now he cleans like external, like he does external house cleaning. Okay. He's a bit of a hustler.
Okay.
But at the time, when I was a little kid, he ran a Mexican restaurant on the Gold Coast, but there was just always music playing. But I don't know if it was. And my dad played guitar, and that's right, and I played drums.
Right.
I wanted to play drums.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm blanking on this stuff. But I played drums for about 6 years as a little kid. And then I wanted to be a rapper. And I think just watching, like being intrigued by video clips on Rage.
Yeah.
And
who are you seeing? Do you remember?
Well, I had a lot of friends who had older brothers or older cousins who couldn't kind of like snuck me tapes of like Public Enemy and Ice Cube.
Yep.
And
Did they have to sneak them to you?
yeah, I was a little too young
Okay.
to be listening to that stuff, so I kind of hid it from my parents, from mum, and then and so I just wanted to be a rapper. I thought it was like really badass, and so I started to write little raps, and
How old are you at this point?
I would have been like maybe 8,
Okay.
7 or 8.
What's an 8-year-old rapping about?
Gibberish, no sense.
The Mexican restaurant.
It might have been even young. I might have been younger than that. I might have been like 5 or 6.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I had some pretty bad influences musically growing up, but yeah. So I'd make little tapes on my mum's tape deck,
Yeah.
and I always kind of was always intrigued with the creation of music. It wasn't just I wanted to perform. I actually wanted to record things, and I was into technical gadgets, and I'd make little cardboard, I don't know, electronic looking things with I'd make little knobs. Like I was always intrigued by the the buttons and
Yeah.
things like that.
Where'd that come from, do you reckon?
I have no idea. I can't tell you. Neither of my parents were too techie. I think some people are just born like that, right?
Yeah.
Like different characteristics, different things interest different people. Yeah, I was just intrigued by it. But then my dad's friend, Terry, he had a little studio set up in his house, and my dad would take me over there, and I was in heaven. I was like, this is the best thing I've ever seen. And it was an old Tascam 8-channel tape recorder, Porter Studio. So it's kind of before, computers were used, and everything would be recorded to cassette. And so he'd teach me how to use the faders and the little keyboards, and I would program little beats and go in there. And I used to drag my dad had a girlfriend at the time, and she had 3 kids, and so they're practically like my stepbrothers. And I convinced the middle one to be in a rap group with me.
Yeah.
And I dragged him to the studio. He didn't want to do it, but I kind of forced him to do it. I was bigger than him, so he had to. His name was Sean, and I used to drag him to my dad's friend's studio and write his raps and record little rap songs with him.
That's great.
About being like grounded and we were like 8 years old.
Yeah.
He might have been like maybe 6 or 7, maybe a little older than that, but young, really young.
Can you remember him at all?
The songs?
Yeah,
I don't remember
the
any of
raps.
the lyrics or anything, and even if I did, I would not broadcast it. But it was fun. It was really fun, and the fact I could take the tape and put it in my mum's tape player and listen to my voice back and listen to the beat back and just listen to everything. It was incredible. And I'd put little thunder, I'd put like thunder sound effects in the songs. I just did that creation, but also the technical side of it really interested me as well.
So what did your mum do as well?
My mum was a hustler. She helped Dad with the restaurant for a while. Then she went on to sell. She sold a lot of bootleg goods. So I remember she had like trunk loads of like fake Ray-Bans and fake aftershaves, and she used to sell them at the Carrara markets,
Right.
and other markets around the Gold Coast. And she did really well off that stuff. Yeah, she's a little bit of a what'd you call it back when they used to like bootleg alcohol?
Oh, was bootlegger? Is that the
Bootlegger, I guess. Yeah,
Right, yeah.
yeah. She was doing that sort of stuff. We had I think a government agent come to our house once, not looking for mum, but looking for who supplied mum with this
Really?
stuff. I don't know where mum got it. I
Looking
think she
for-
used to get it from someone in China or something. But
looking for the big fish?
yeah, but my mum had big shipments of like fake goods,
Wow.
and she just kind of hustled her way,
Yeah.
and yeah. So I don't know if I adopted any of that hustle.
Well, I was
Maybe
going to
a little
say,
bit.
you need hustle in the industry that you're in. Maybe
Yeah.
that's where you've.
Like persistence, maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
And my dad, like I said, he was a restaurateur, but he also played the guitar, so he was the main musical influence.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So once you started going to that studio and you got exposed to that world of making and creating music, was it from that early point were you captured? Like, did other things sort of go to the wayside?
Yeah, drumming. I stopped drumming. I was like kind of surfing a little bit. I stopped doing that. Music was the main focus.
Okay.
There was nothing else I wanted to do.
Where did school fit in?
Barely did. I missed a lot of year 12, and my mum gave me her old car in year 12 too, so I had more freedom. So I'd leave after first period. I went to Miami High School, and it was on this hill, and at the back of the hill was like the very top of the hill. There was the film and TV class, which I actually liked because it was like as close to the music stuff I was doing as you could get. But the car park was right behind that, so I would just kind of leave and sneak off. And somehow I passed year 12. I don't know how I did it. But no, music was always first.
Okay.
I think that was a big key to my success. Well, it's, played a big part to get me to where I'm at, was the fact that no matter what was happening in my life, music came first.
Okay.
So yes, I worked a job. I was at McDonald's, but it was just so I could fund my music.
Yeah.
And yes, I went to school, but any spare time I had, instead of going out and partying or surfing or whatever, I'd go and make beats. Or make music with my friends. So
And you were rapping at that point as well?
I was trying to.
Okay.
I was giving it my best shot. Failing miserably.
Was it Trace Elements? Was that
That's
the name?
right. Yeah. Wow. Did your research? Yes. Trace Elements was there with my friend, my good friends to this day, Adam and Archie, and there was a few other people that were kind of like associates, and our friend Lee, who worked at Sunflower Records on the Gold Coast, kind of was our biggest supporter, and he'd stock our music on his shelves in the record store and put it in front of everyone else's, and it was fun. But that was the rap group that I was in.
After the break, M-Phazes talks about posting beats on the internet in the mid-90s, what it felt like when he finally tasted success, and how he's learned to stop judging his worth as a person by the way other people react to his music. Welcome back to Humans of Music and my interview with M-Phazes. Before the break, M-Phazes talked about starting his career as a rapper, but around the year 2000 he decided his future lay behind the scenes in production and songwriting, which is where we pick up the conversation.
I think I just strayed from the performance side of it. I do consider myself an artist, but I am also more the technician, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's artists who are like free flowing and just let the creative happen, and I'm more like, no. Format, and it has to have structure and da. So and it's more problem solving for me.
Yeah.
A lot of the time. So I think I just like the process of helping the song get made, but not actually being a part of the performance side of it.
Okay.
So I enjoyed recording my friends. So I stayed in the group as the producer.
Yeah.
And I'd record my friends, and I remember, just driving around with Archie, and I'd just be like, "You want to go make a song?" Like, yeah, let's go make a song. It was just something we did.
Yeah.
And we'd go make a song. But
Good days?
really fun. There was no pressure. There was no money involved. You always look back on the fond parts of it. I'm sure there were really terrible parts, like performing at a Hard Rock Cafe to about 20 people who were trying to enjoy their meal. And these like 3 kids trying to rap, just disturbing them. But no, it was fun. It was like we were all learning.
Yeah.
I was learning. It was just, interesting times.
Yeah, because the Australian scene wasn't as developed back then.
It wasn't, and we didn't even know an Australian scene existed on the Gold Coast. Like, to us, we were the only people doing it in Australia. We're like, we're the first Aussie rappers ever. Little did we know there was a whole thing happening down in Melbourne and Sydney, and Brisbane as well.
Yep.
Later on, we met a few people from Brisbane, and we kind of realized, maybe we're not so special. Like, there's other people doing this as well. And then later on, we kind of got introduced to different people around there.
Yeah.
Around the Australian music scene.
And so was it around that time that you started putting your beats online and online forums? And
Yeah, the second the internet started, I was on that thing. I was on the internet forums. I would have said like maybe 95, 96.
So early.
Really early. Might have been earlier than that. But there was a particular website I went to called undergroundhiphop.com.
Mm-hmm.
And they had forums. So I think it was a shop, but they also had a forum as well. If for those kids out there, a forum is basically like a chat room. You post messages and people can respond. And I used to go into they had a production forum. And so you'd go in there and you'd share tips and tricks and show your music. So I used to post my music on there and the good thing about that was it was like unbiased feedback.
Yeah.
And it was feedback from people in America who, were listening to like the pioneers, and they were listening to the people we looked up to. So they weren't comparing you to Joe down the street. They were comparing you to DJ Premier and these big hip-hop producers. So that really kind of made me hone my craft.
How did you fare? What was the feedback? Was there some brutal
I
feedback?
was terrible at first.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was trash, but there was potential in there. I think people could hear the potential.
Yeah.
But again, they didn't know what I looked like. They didn't know what I sounded like, when I spoke.
Yeah.
They didn't see that I was a certain color or whatever, or that I was Aussie from the Gold Coast. There's all these certain characteristics can make someone perceive you a certain way and judge your music on that, Whereas all they heard was they just heard the music and a screen name. And so I was like, it would be like, oh, yeah, it's pretty good, but this kick drum's pretty trash, and the drums could be louder. And so I'd take all those little notes that I would get in these forums and just apply them, and slowly started to get better and better.
Yeah,
to where I was like, I was one of the top producers on that forum. And the legend of M-Phazes rings true on undergroundhiphop.com. But that website actually spawned a few really big producers, namely a guy called Illmind, who's now just killing it. He started selling drum kits that turned into a whole brand called Blap Kits, and now he is on every rap album that comes out. He produces a bunch of stuff. His business is booming with the drum samples. He's like one of the biggest mentors in the hip hop in the production community. Crazy following on all his social media platforms. People just love him. So he's really done well for himself. And a friend of mine, S1, who I produce with, he's from the forums, and there's a couple of others. And we stay in touch. It's really cool.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Like you never know where things are going to lead, because S1 ended up being, I suppose, your connection with Eminem.
Exactly. Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Our Tunji, who now works at RCA and he signed Rule, found me via the forums back in the day, and I used to send him beats.
Right.
It's just insane.
Yeah.
It's like that forum really helped a lot of people.
Yeah. And so when did Mark Landon become M-Phazes?
Well, M-Phazes is one of my original rap names, so I think that name came about. I can't believe I usually tell this story to to friends.
Yeah,
not thinking, but
we're friends.
Yeah, we are friends, and the listeners, I guess, we're friends too. But the name M-Phazes comes from my original rap name, which was M-Phazes.
Right.
And I was like a nerdy backpack rapper, and I wanted to battle everyone. And back then it was like the bigger the words you had in your raps, the cooler you were.
Yeah.
And I started noticing everyone on these internet forums had the same name. Like it was a common rap name, Emphasis. And I was like, well, this sucks. I should probably change it.
Yep.
And so I just kind of flipped it into M for Mark, and then Phase is just whatever. There's no meaning behind it. It's just whatever.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things where I still didn't really like it, but it just stuck.
Okay.
And before I knew it, it was like, that was the name.
How many people call you Mark?
Barely anyone.
Okay.
Like no one really. My dad and a couple of select people in my life, but no, it's weird to hear that name.
Yeah.
It's strange.
Become Phases.
Just Phases, yeah. Phases
okay.
is what people call me. Or Bart. There's a few people call me Bart, which is another story. Yeah. Bartholomew's. That's a name I was dubbed by my friend Katrina and Corinne. Thank you very much, ladies. I appreciate it.
Why was that?
Oh, we were in Byron Bay. We were just having a holiday, and they're really close friends of mine, and we were talking about middle names, and I was like, I didn't get a middle name. My parents just didn't feel like I needed one. Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, we're going to give you one. And they spent 3 days thinking of the perfect middle name, and they landed on Bartholomew's.
I wonder why.
Yeah. Mark Bartholomew's Landon. So I think they just felt like it fit snug between Mark and Landon.
It's got a nice ring to it.
And then Bart became the nickname of that.
Yeah. So you end up moving to Melbourne.
Yes.
How quickly after you arrive in Melbourne do things sort of start to fall into place?
I think maybe a year. I started hitting a bit of a rhythm.
Okay.
And working with a lot of people, and Nate was introducing me to people, and I do a lot of jobs for people, not necessarily because I thought they were great as artists, but because they were good people to know in Melbourne.
Right.
And if you had any issues, there were certain people you want to have your back. Because this is the hip hop days. This is the graffiti. It's like, because there's some rough people out there, and if I'm associated with certain people, it just makes I can rest easy.
Was it rough? Was it?
Well, I didn't see any. I mean, it was a little rough. I think I missed that era of Melbourne hip hop. I think it was kind of on the way out when I got there. But there was still some instances where I was like, I'm glad I'm on the right side of this person. And
right.
Yeah, a few ruffians around the hood. It's weird because Aussie hip hop, there's almost two. It stems from two places, and one of those places is the graffiti world. Like that's almost like it's a genre within itself, like graffiti hip hop.
Yep.
And that's like more of the street style stuff. And there are some characters in that side that it's like that you don't want to mess with them. You know what I mean?
Okay.
But if you can make friends with them, then it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a bit of that.
So you went on, I guess, after you got settled, you went on a bit of a golden run down in Melbourne with your solo music, with Kimbro, with Illy, and then obviously landing the Eminem track.
Yeah.
What did that success feel like?
It was great. You know, it was nice to know every year I was stepping up a bit and looking back and going, I'm a little further ahead from where I was last year. The people I'm working with are a little higher up the chain or whatever, you know. So that was really cool. It took a while to get to the Kimbras and the success with Illy. Like that was a bit later on in the piece in Melbourne. At first, it was like lots of underground hip hop. Lots of remixes, just trying to get my name out there. But the thing that really turned it around was my album Good Gracious, which is like a showcase of Australian hip-hop over my production, which wasn't that common yet because I hadn't worked with many of the artists in the Australian scene. You know, I'd kind of just been working with Americans and working with my friends on the Gold Coast and then working with my immediate crew in Melbourne. So my manager, Nate, and I were like, you should do an album and feature these Aussie rappers that are kind of well-known. And that'll really solidify your place down here. And that really did it. It really put my name out there, did really well. We toured it. We took a lot of the artists on the tour. And I think that really turned my music production career around.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Were there times leading up to that where you wondered if you'd made the right decision about going to Melbourne?
Not really. No, I never really questioned the move to Melbourne. I did think, am I making the right decision by not going to the States? Right. Even though I ended up going to the States before that was the thing, I kept thinking, am I messing up my chances, you know, of kind of making it over there? There was that, yeah. And there was some times where I'd come to Sydney and I'd be like, oh, maybe I should have moved here. But no, I loved Melbourne. It was great. I think it was the right place for me.
Yeah.
And like the style of music I make and the type of people I like to work with.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So that move to LA, I guess that was the second big geographical move for you. Obviously, the first being Gold Coast to Melbourne and now Melbourne to LA. What have those moves taught you about yourself?
I mean, the thing both of them have taught me is that I can handle it. You know, I can handle what life throws at me. Like I'm way more persistent than I think I am, basically, and resilient as well. The Melbourne move, that really taught me that I could make music a career and that I'm good enough and I deserve to be in the position I'm in. And I think the LA move was more like a personal thing. Like as much as I love Nate and he's great, it was one of those things where he went above and beyond all the time. So it's almost like I didn't have to do anything. So it did make me it made me very complacent and very comfortable in Melbourne, and I had a cushy life. It was easy. The routine was there, and so when I moved to LA, I was kind of jolted out of that.
Yeah,
and kind of realized how how reliant I was on other people, and how much I seeked approval from other people as well. That's the big thing I've learned this year from the move from LA is like learning to overcome that and not putting so much worth as a person in my music. Like I'd use my music to, and it's going to get heavy now, but I used to use my music as like a distraction from me. So like, no, judge the music. Like that's good. You know, don't look at me as a person. And I'd put, so I couldn't have real connections with people. I couldn't open up to people because it was all about my music. And that was me. Whereas the LA move and I think just being thrown into the deep end over there and not being a name over there. Like I'm not a big producer over there, and I'll happily admit that. I like that because it gives me something to aim towards. But in Australia, I was one of the big producers, so everyone knew who I was, and everyone was nice to me, and artists were nice to me, and everyone was nice because I could help them, or I'm a name or whatever. Whereas it wasn't like that in LA. So it taught me to like learn about myself and learn to be happy with myself as a person, and not attach my worth to my music.
Yeah.
And just treat music as that's just something I do. And I'm proud of it and I'm good at it and I don't have to, but I'm me.
Yeah.
So that was the huge thing from the LA move.
Where do you reckon that even came from in the first place, that sort of attachment?
I have no idea. I definitely had low self-esteem as a kid. Very low self-esteem. Wasn't a confident kid. So music was something I was finally good at. It was one of those things where, and I don't know if this played a role, but, I tried breakdancing and I was okay, but then a bunch of kids would start it, a few months after I started and just be way better than me. And same with skateboarding. And I was never I never seemed to be good at things. I played basketball. I was the worst on the basketball team. I was the worst on the soccer team, even though we were both undefeated. But that was just because the other players were really good. So those things really kind of taught me to not take credit for things and play down my achievements and act like I'm not responsible for the achievements. Like, oh, you guys were undefeated. But I didn't really do anything to help that. I was, you kind of play yourself down when you have issues like that. And so I think with music, it was like, oh my God, I'm not to brag, but I'm the best at this.
You found something.
No one's messing with me on this. And I was like, I have to, excuse my language, I have to like put everything into this.
Yeah.
And I can't let anyone else get, like that was the other thing, get quite defensive. I can't let anyone else get to where I'm at, otherwise then I'm nothing again.
Yeah.
So it's heavy stuff. I don't know where it stems from. And I'm not blaming my parents, but I think, maybe the upbringing or the environment I was in, or maybe it's just my temperament.
Sure.
Maybe I'm susceptible to that. I think we all have characteristics. So it took me a little while to overcome that. I dealt with a lot of anxiety in Melbourne, a lot of seeking people's approval, feeling like I had to always be this perfect person. Nothing was wrong. I didn't need any help, and the LA move really kind of helped me overcome that, or is helping me overcome that.
So what is it about LA that's helped you do that?
Again, I think it was just the fact I'm an unknown producer over there.
Okay.
No one, like barely anyone knew who I was. I would walk into a room and in Australia, it was like, M-Phazes, oh man, I love da-da-da-da, you're great, da-da-da. And artists would suck up because they want to track or whatever.
Yep.
But in LA, it's like, cool. So who are you? Where are you from? Oh, cool, man. Like whatever. Like we don't care.
Is that confronting as well?
Yeah, it was scary. It was daunting going over and starting fresh and starting as the nobody and having to work my way up. I was lucky enough to have a really good team and friends who were quite successful, who gave me I hit the ground running. Mm-hmm. But yeah, as daunting as it was, it's exactly what I needed. I had to feel like a nobody in order to like have that drive to get somewhere.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what drives me now, is like feeling like the worst in the room and feeling like I have something to get to.
Okay.
Now I use that to lift me up. Some people can use it as a victim mentality thing.
Yeah.
And be like, poor me, what is it? Da, 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 da. I'm like, I'm gonna show you all. Like, you guys are amazing. I want to get to that level.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or I want to impress this writer. Oh, this artist works with these producers who I look up to. I want to impress them. You know what I mean? And it kind of drives me. So.
Yeah, that's cool. After the break, Phazes talks about the dark place he found himself in after moving to LA, how he's learned to deal with rejection, and which artists have taught him the most. Welcome back to Humans of Music and my interview with M-Phazes. One of the big hurdles facing any artist moving to LA is how to get your voice heard over the thousands of other artists who are all there looking for their big break. And we pick up the conversation with Phazes talking about his strategy for navigating that noise.
You just have you really do have to keep the blinders on. You can't focus on what other people are doing. And I made that mistake early on. I think in the first 6 months, a friend of mine, Louis Schrull from Jaxsta, he is one of my best friends, like the best person ever. And this is what makes it so weird, is he'd been living in LA for a year before I moved there. So he kind of had his life together and set up and everything. And I forgot that he was there the year before that, and he was struggling just like I was. But I was seeing him having like songs coming out, and I was busy trying to find an apartment. And I think as a creative, sometimes if you feel like you're not contributing creatively to something or working on something, you feel useless. So I got in a really dark place in those first 6 months of living in LA, and just like, wow, like nothing's happening with my career. What have I done? This sucks. And seeing what Louis was doing, be like, I want that, and getting kind of jealous about it. But I'm lucky enough to be self-aware, and so I saw that happening, and I was like, something's not right. What is it? So I started exercising. That really helped.
Yeah.
The exercise really helped. And then I just started working on music. I started putting the headphones on. The second I'm doing something, working on music, it doesn't matter how small it is or big it is. Like, my friends could be working with, I don't know who's the biggest, Beyonce. And I could be working with this no-name artist who I just think's great. And it doesn't matter when I'm in that process.
Yeah.
Like, what they're doing, nothing matters. I'm just creating, and I'm loving it. It's fun, and I don't care if it's the biggest song in the world or if no one hears it. But when you're creating, it's when you feel like you have a purpose. And I think that's important is to feel like you have a purpose.
Yeah, it's such a big thing, mental health. Like it's such
Yeah.
a big thing to learn how to actually what works for you in terms of dealing with it.
Huge thing, especially in a creative field like that where you feel like constantly being judged.
Yeah, a lot of rejection too.
Tons. Oh my God, so much rejection. Yeah, it can really eat away at you. And I was lucky enough, even though I kind of realized it a bit later in life. I guess some people go through life and never realize that, and it just tortures them. And I think it was important for me to broadcast that. To maybe hopefully inspire other people to kind of look at themselves and be like, maybe something's not right here. Maybe I need to look at this and do some work.
And has that helped with the rejection?
It's immensely. Like the way I handle rejection now is like it's like I'm a whole different person to who I was. I used to take it quite personally. If I did a song for someone and they didn't like the production, it would cut me at my core. Like it would stab me in the heart, and I would take it as a personal thing. Whereas now, like, I don't take it so personally. It can still sting a little bit, but it's but no, I'm able to look at it from their point of view and be like, cool. It's not, we have different ears, we have different tastes. It's not what you're after. Totally cool,
Yeah.
I do some jobs on spec, and they can be like, yeah, it's not really what we're after, and that can sting because you've spent so long on it. But no, you just now I've learned to just pick up and move on and don't take it personal. I think that's the biggest trick, is to not take it personal.
Yeah.
But when it's your art, that's the hard part, right?
Totally. What's the biggest eye-opener in the industry over there? Like, what's the thing that really sort of took you by surprise?
I kind of knew this, but I didn't know it was to this extreme. But just how much relationships matter, and how like networking and favors for people play a role in who gets what, in the industry, and that can sometimes trump the talent. Which can be a little disheartening, but at the end of the day, it is a business, and there's lots of people's livelihoods at stake, and lots of people make, and they earn a living from it. So you can play that game, but I like to, there's different facets of the LA industry, and you can be the person who's really talented, who doesn't really schmooze that much. You can be the person who isn't that talented, but has so much work ethic and drive that they just make friends with everyone and get jobs like that. I'm definitely more the former. I'm not a big schmoozer. I'm not a big networker. But I do like to network, but I like the networking to be organic,
So what happens when, like, what does a Grammy do for your career in terms of helping with those relationships?
Gives doors? Me a street cred. No, it wasn't like the doors like swung wide open. The best thing the Grammy did for me was help me get the visa for the States, because it's a question they ask you.
Have you won a Grammy?
Yeah. If
Really?
you're a musician, on the interview. And I've heard multiple accounts of that. And then they asked me, I was like, oh, it's true. You guys do ask this. As a matter of fact, I do have a Grammy.
And here it is.
And then they asked what it was for. And I don't know if they'd done their research. They knew this and they were just testing me. But it was funny. The guy who interviewed me, he was quite stern at first. Not rude, but just like, he's probably been doing that all day. Probably ready to go home. And the second I said I won a Grammy, he looked up and it's like a twinkle in his eye appeared, and he just kind of got a little more chummy.
Okay.
I guess he maybe found out I was legit, and he's like, so what'd you get it for? I was like, oh, Eminem. Oh, cool. And he started like suggesting music documentaries I should watch. It was cool. But yeah, that's probably the biggest thing. But I mean, just saying I've won a Grammy is still weird to me.
Right.
It's very weird. But it's helped in subtle ways. Like, people are more likely to give me a meeting. Helps on the resume. If a songwriter sees that, they're more likely to work with me. So it's things like that. I think if I won a Grammy for a humongous single, that's when the doors fly open. Like, singles kind of fix everything, like big singles. And I haven't had a massive single yet, but I have a feeling that's when you see the doors really fly open.
Yeah,
and the phone starts ringing off the hook.
Yeah, okay.
It's with a huge single. So
yeah. What did it mean to your parents?
They're super proud. They're the most supportive parents anyone could ask for. My dad's more supportive on the, because he played guitar. He was kind of more the, I don't know what you'd call it, but the guiding support. And mum was she didn't really get it, but she was just happy that I was just doing something productive, or what seemed productive. So she bought my first computer, and she was just there for me when I needed it. But dad was more the like playing songs with me and playing music in the car and My dad's a little more musically inclined than mum.
Okay.
So he was more like jamming together and doing this, and mum was more like, what can I do to help? Tell me. Oh, you need some money for a computer? Here you go. You know,
Nice.
and just being cool with me leaving, like coming home from school early, not questioning, you know. Yeah, they were great.
Yeah,
they were
cool.
awesome.
And what, in terms of what you were talking about earlier, where you were saying you were growing up, you'd always sort of deflect credit. Has that helped being a songwriter? Because, you know, quite often you'll work on songs, but then the artist is the person who gets the credit from a public point of view.
Right.
Does that, what you were talking about earlier with your experience growing up, do you think that helps you deal with that? Or is that something that frustrates you?
No, it caused a lot of passive aggressive behavior in me because I wanted the praise and I didn't ask for the praise, or you know what I mean. Like I just when you have approval seeking tendencies, you tend to expect. You know, you expect things without actually asking for them straight up. Now I don't expect it. So I don't need praise because I give myself approval. As corny as that sounds, like I don't need your approval. So Illy would go on TV and mention his album, and he wouldn't shout me out, and I'd get really offended by that or get really sour about it. Why is he getting all the credit? But it's an immature stance because he also has to travel around and tour, and it's draining, and he has to do the promo. He has to wake up at 7 a.m, jump on a plane, go here, perform. It's grueling work, and I'm in my cushy studio just relaxing. I can live a normal life, you know. And it's the path I chose. But now it's more like, oh, you want me to produce for you? Great. Here's the terms. Here's my fee. You don't have to thank me. You don't have to do anything. It's not, but and it also makes the thank yous way better.
Yeah.
Like the fact Amy and Rule both thanked me for their ARIA wins. Like I wasn't expecting that.
Yep.
And it was so nice to hear, and it just makes it sweeter.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not bitter about it if I don't get thanked. It's just like, yeah, no, it's fine.
Yeah,
you know,
cool.
I've got what I needed from it, which was my fee, and I did the best job I could, and I'm proud of myself for that.
So, as you're well aware, Jaxsta is all about giving credit where credit's due.
It's great.
Where, who are some of the people that you would give credit to for helping you get to where you are today?
Oh wow, this is so many. My parents, obviously, for one, you know, they've been so supportive and have always been there for me. Terry, my dad's friend with the studio, he played a really important role. My friends on the Gold Coast, who I made music with early on, Adam and Archie and a few others, just being able to have that outlet and have friends who supported that and were like involved and proud and who else? Nate has played the biggest role out of anyone. He is so selfless and such a champion of the people he represents. And yeah, I wouldn't have gotten nearly to where I'm at now without Nate. You know, and the good thing is when I moved to LA, I was worried that we wouldn't work together anymore because you know he'd be busy in Australia, and it's tough for someone that isn't in the States to manage someone who is there because you kind of have to be there and you kind of have to have the network. But Rule kind of popped up right before I left. So, you know, that kind of kept us joined professionally and we were able to keep working together. And now we just stay in touch just as much as we did, practically. And he's in LA all the time with Rule. And, I get to work with my bro. So, but yeah, Nate probably played the most important part of my career, definitely.
Are there any artists you've worked with who have changed the way you look at things, whether it be life or how you create?
Yeah, definitely. Oh, definitely creatively. Kimbra being one of them. She was the first artist I worked with that wasn't in the hip hop world or the R&B world. You know, she was making kind of pop music, like alternative kind of pop music, and they got me. Her and her team got me into kind of help add like a bit of a hip hop sound to it. But it ended up being the thing where I was like, oh, I can do music outside of hip hop. And to me, that's a challenge. Like, can I do it? Let me try it, you know. So Kimbra really, you know, helped set me off on that path to where now I feel like I'm just viewed as a producer, not any particular genre producer, which is really what I wanted to get to. Daniel Johns was a huge influence. Just he taught me not to be afraid of just trying everything and not being afraid and being cool with it, not sounding good, like failing, you know, because he's so experimental that like he'll do like a million ideas and a lot of them will be terrible. They'll make no sense. They won't sound good. But then all of that pushing, he has a term, it's like push the boat out. But all of that pushing will lead to something that's just like, you would never have found that had you not just gone a little crazy and done some weird out there stuff. So Daniel, I think there's a bunch. My friend Josh, aka Hopium, just incredible songwriter and artist. Dan Hume. I'm not trying to make this a Grammy speech, by the way. There's just so many, you know, there's so many. A guy I just started working with quite a bit, Sam Dew, who's an artist / songwriter. He co-wrote that Zayn Taylor Swift song.
Right.
I forget the name of it. I'm sorry. But he's just... I really like writers who are think outside the box. Luke Steele is another one. Just not the typical songwriters, you know, and people who are not afraid to experiment.
Yeah. Well, Mark, thanks so much for sharing everything with us today.
Oh, wow, we're done.
Done.
Wow. That went really quickly. It was awesome. Good
Thanks,
chat.
man. Appreciate it.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
And that's it for another episode of Humans of Music. A big thanks to M-Phazes for his time, and thank you for listening. This episode was recorded at Parliament Studios in Annandale, and it was mixed and engineered by Lachlan Mitchell, also from Parliament Studios. The incidental music and theme song were written and performed by Sam Lockwood. Please remember to subscribe to the Humans of Music podcast so you never miss an episode, or even better, share it amongst your friends and rate and review it. And remember, for the rest of the year, Jaxsta Pro is free, so if you make music or work behind the scenes in the music industry, head to jaxsta.com and sign up to become a Jaxsta Pro member. Until the next episode of Humans of Music, I'm Rod Yates. Thanks for listening.